Navin Girishankar here with Betting on America. I could not get enough of the conversation with Jan Sramek of California Forever, so I was lucky to get him back on here. There's some additional news around his phenomenal project in Solano County. Jan, great to see you.
It's great to be back. A little bit earlier than I expected, but it's good to be back, Navin.
Well, let's get into this because I saw the news and I've been reading a little bit about this project. I want to say this. We talked about reindustrialization. We talked about reimagining the American city and the significantly sized project that you have and the various industries and the factories of the future that are part of your vision. At the end of the day, it's about the resourcefulness of people and it's about how workers can benefit from this. And so with that, I wanted to get your readout on this new agreement, this really landmark labor agreement that you've struck. So tell us a little bit about that.
Last week we announced a historic labor agreement. It's the largest construction labor agreement in American history, and so it applies to the entirety of the nearly 70,000 acres that we own. It applies for everything that we build for the next 40 years. Um, and basically says that the vast majority of the things that we build are going to be built with union labor. The infrastructure, the shipyard work, constructing the shipyard, any kind of aerospace, industrial space, office space, public works, and so on. If you look at the impacts of it, we announced it in connection with a new study that came out of the Bay Area Council
Okay.
here in California, which looked at the economic impacts of the project. And I think the numbers from there were the build out over 40 years is about 17,000 jobs nonstop for 40 years just in construction. And the majority of those would be union. And so it goes back to what you and I talked about last time, which is how do we reindustrialize the country, but also bring back the California dream and the American dream and create jobs that people can have for decades and generations.
Amazing. Now you've got to tell me, how did you get to a deal like this?
We I mean, this is a very complex deal to negotiate, right? This took 2 years to get to an agreement, and there's a lot of details that go into it. But I think there's kind of two sides to it. I think part of it is just getting to know the people and building trust.
Mhm.
And so we spend a lot of time getting to know our partners and understanding what they needed and what we needed, and really build that relationship over the last 2 years with all of the I think there's 18 constituent unions that have signed onto the agreement. It's the
Mm.
building trades, and there are 16 or 17 affiliates, and then it's the Northern California Carpenters. And so there's a very personal relationship component
Mhm.
to it of just us trusting the leadership there and knowing them and them getting to know us, and really building the trust. And then the second one was just um, even figuring out how do you sign a labor agreement of something of this scale.
Yeah.
'Cause it covers 110 square miles. It covers an area that's 50% bigger than Washington, DC, the entire district.
Wow.
Um, and so there was an amount of, just thinking through how should it work over such a long period, because it's not like saying we're going to build an airport terminal, and this agreement is going to apply to that. But I'm excited to be able to get it done.
Yeah. And a lot of times you hear about um, like how costly U.S. labor is, and that has been a constraint, some would say, on reindustrialization. How do you tackle that in this agreement?
I mean, we start by, thinking about how do you actually build factories of the future? How do you actually build industrial facilities in the future? And I think our perspective on it and why we are bullish on building in California is that if we're going to try to compete with China by competing on the cost of labor, we're going to fail.
Eh,
We never be gonna be able to compete with the Far East on cost of labor. And so the
yeah.
only way to do it is to use robotics and artificial intelligence to build factories of the future or shipyards of the future where we rapidly increase the productivity per worker. So the same worker can have a much higher productivity per hour or per day, and that is what number one makes the factory more productive. That is then what allows that factory to pay that worker much more. It's also what makes the job more interesting.
I
It's what
see.
makes the job more fun. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot easier to imagine developing a new process or a new way of building a factory
Yeah.
where you increase productivity by 80% or 100% or by 200% than
Yeah.
it is finding the one location in America where labor is 20% or 30% cheaper than in California. I think we
Yeah.
have a lot more room to grow in terms of increasing productivity than we have trying to compete on cost. Um, and of course, why that matters for us is if you think about the people who are going to design the factories of the future and build them, and all of the robotics talent and the AI talent that it requires, um, 80% of those people live in the Bay Area, 80
Yeah.
minutes from where we are building. And so the ability for um, software and hardware and AI engineers and researchers working side by side with the people who are actually operating the production line, where those people can get in a car in the morning in San Francisco or in Menlo Park and get to Solano 80 minutes later and then be home in time for dinner instead of getting to get on a plane and fly to another state in the country, which is a 3-day trip. That's what's going to drive the pace of innovation. And
Yeah.
that is a lot of what China has been able to do by building the gigantic clusters in Shenzhen and Guangzhou and other places.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you laid this out in the podcast that we did. And what's interesting is now it's materialized in the form of this agreement. So again, really commend you and your teams and the labor unions and others who got this deal done. Um, You mentioned the study that laid out estimates on job creation through time over multiple decades, I guess. Um, can you give me a sense of some important milestones that are ahead of you for this to actually materialize?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the numbers and then let's look at the timeline. I think so. The headline numbers is the Solano Foundry, which is the advanced manufacturing park, the Solano shipyard, and then what we call Solano Living, which is about 174,000 new homes.
Yeah,
Altogether, over the next 40 years, that's about a $215 billion investment in California's future and American future.
yeah,
Um, that would create about 530,000 jobs, so about 225,000 jobs in the new city, another, I think, 80,000 jobs in broader Solano County, and then jobs behind that in California because there's a whole supply chain that comes together to support it. Um,
yeah.
and then at full build out, when we get to 2070, you're looking at about $3 billion in local tax revenues, about $4 billion in state tax revenues, and about
Mm,
another $9 billion in federal tax revenues every year. So the scale of it is very hard to comprehend just because we haven't
yeah,
done it.
yeah,
Um, Although when you think about it, you say, well, if you build a city for 400,000 people and all of the associated industry and office and so on uses, of course, it's going to have a massive economic impact.
right.
Um, I think the other part that the labor agreement has brought together, and it goes to your timeline question, um, is this call to arms in California, where not just labor, but a lot of former elected officials and community leaders and public intellectuals have come together, and they basically issued a call on the local and the state government to find a way to break ground in 2026.
2026. Okay.
They- Essentially saying the land is ready, the plans are ready, the workers are now ready, and the only
Yeah,
thing that stands in the way is process. And for something of this historic significance, let's find a way to do the processing in parallel so that we can break ground. Because as you and I discussed, a lot of these companies need space to build right now. A lot
yeah,
of the people who work in the community, you and I talked about it last time. They commute 2 hours for work every day today. They don't have 3 years to spend 3 years doing that. They want the
yeah,
job in the community locally today, and so there's a lot of
right.
reasons for why this should be accelerated. And in California, we do this all the time. If you come in and you want to build a basketball arena or a sports stadium, you go and get a permit like that, and you can break ground in 9 months. And so,
Yeah,
what the unions and us and a lot of other people are saying is, hey, if we can do this for sports stadiums, surely we can do it for ships and factories and homes for the middle class.
phenomenal. I'm very interested in the fact that you brought so many different stakeholders together. I think you alluded to that just now.
Mhm.
Give us a little bit of your secret sauce on that, because I think that's where other initiatives, not nearly of this scale, but even smaller ones, trip up. So, what lessons could you share with us that maybe others could take on board?
I mean, I think the one that is universally applicable the most probably is just the importance of building trust. And so, of course, when we came into the community, we were outsiders, um, run by a guy with a funny accent who's certainly not from Solano County. And so people were suspicious. But I think over the last 2 years, we've been able to build a lot of trust. Um, I think that applies generally speaking. The one that applies, I think, to some projects is um, I'm a big believer that a bunch of the problems in America today get easier to solve when you zoom out and you make them bigger. Some problems actually get easier to solve as you get bigger because you have a bigger chessboard. You have more things to negotiate. You have more things that you can offer, and
More
you can use.
margins for maneuver.
Yeah, exactly. And you can kind of, I think you can design a bigger win. You can design a project that just creates a lot more value, which allows you to solve bigger problems. And so,
Yeah.
um, a component of that is the labor agreement. Another component of it is saying, at this scale, this is big enough to be an economic engine, not just for the city where it's getting built, which is called Suisun City, but for
Hmm.
all of Solano County. And it can really generate, I think the estimates is it's about $100 million in additional local tax revenue in just the next 5 years. And so
Yeah.
that is enough to really pay for police and fire and public safety and teachers and nurses throughout the whole region.
Yeah.
Um, and so using the scale of it, I think in a productive way has been another component of it.
Yeah. And, there have been some urban theorists who argue that ultimately a city is a labor market.
Mhm.
And what you've done here, I think, is really begin that process of labor market development. You have some labor pools, but you've actually constructed something in an organized way that we get to watch and see in real time, in terms of its agglomeration effects, its spillovers, its benefits. So I think we'll keep watching this. It's really quite exciting. I don't think there's anything of this magnitude elsewhere in the country. But certainly, I want to leave with this, and this is my last question for you. What lessons can we draw for other places in the country? There are other big reindustrialization efforts, not as
Mhm.
big as yours, but other ones that are underway in the country, in other states. What should we take away from this experience, particularly bringing labor in this way?
I mean, I think maybe actually before I go there, it's on the point that the city is a labor market. It's funny that you bring that up. One of my inspirations in terms of building of new cities and urbanism is a man called Alain Bertaud, who was a planner.
I had him in mind when I
You
asked that.
did? You did?
I
I
wrote,
figured you might have been talking about him. So Alan was actually on the site a month ago. So Alan came down and visited,
yeah,
and Alan is one of the people. By the way, Alan is one of the people who just signed the break ground letter and said this is an area that obviously needs jobs. It needs housing. The plans are fantastic. What are we waiting for? And so I was
yeah.
very proud of that, as he's one of my I think inspirations in this. But
And just a plug for him, I think his book is called Order Without Design, right?
that's right.
And
That's right.
I think he's alluding to a Frederick von Hayek statement or quote. But anyway, just an aside there. I'm a fan of that, of his work as well. So please go ahead.
I'm a huge fan of his work, and the book is definitely worth reading. I I think the lessons that apply is I think you can do what we did even at a smaller scale. So someone may
Yeah,
not be able to, you may not be able to put together 70,000 acres outside of a region like Silicon Valley on the water. But I
yeah,
think even for smaller efforts, being able to design a project where in one way or another you bring together a larger mass of people, and it starts with land but other things, and it doesn't have
yeah,
to be that you kind of buy all of it under the same ownership, but it can mean that you have a partnership of a few landowners, or some kind of a group. But I think we need thoughtfully thoughtfully planned clusters at the edges of many of our cities,
yeah,
um, that combine. R&D and manufacturing and residential and kind of mixed use retail components all together.
Yeah.
And I think that can work at a scale of what's effectively a new city, even though in our case, it is being done as an expansion of an existing one.
Yeah.
But I also think that could work at a scale of 2,000 acres. I think if you had the right area at the edge of one of the fast growing regions in America where there's a lot of um, need for a space like that, then you could certainly apply many of the lessons that we've learned. And I would be happy to help anyone looking to do that.
That's excellent. Hey, listen, this is a very complex undertaking, a very ambitious project. There are obviously all kinds of problems along the way, which you must have been solving. But it's good to take a moment when you have a milestone like this to say, wow, okay, uh, one more step towards success. And really, it's quite inspiring. Hats off to you. And we'll watch it. We'll keep watching, and hopefully, we'll have more conversations. And again, I commend you and your team and the people of California.
Thank you. It's great to be back. I think last time we spoke, I said, let's do this again when we break ground. And I was thinking 2028, but who knows? Maybe we'll be talking again in 6 months.
Let's do it. Take care,
Let's do it.
Jan. Huh?
Good to see you,
Okay.
Navin.